All right. Well, Ryan, how should we feel coming out of this road trip? Because I was going into this 10-game road trip saying, look, it's 10 games. You want to go 5-5. That's your goal. You want to at least split the road trip. Obviously, you want to win as many as possible, but you can live with 5-5. They go 6-4. So I should be going, hey, man, great road trip. But something about the way it ended with the Astros just made me feel differently. The offense went flat. You had some sloppy ball out there as far as errors going on, and just it's the Astro. I hate that team so much, Ryan. I hate them so much. And Altuve couldn't hit a lick the entire month of May and just goes on a tear in this series. It was just, I don't know. 6-4 didn't feel as good as I thought it would. I think because of the way it ended. How do you feel coming out of it?
Yeah, I agree. I really agree with you. A couple of things to take away from that road trip. First of all, the good. You go off a homestand where you're really starting to second guess, is this offense for real? Are they coming back down to earth? And then you go and sweep the Padres. And by the way, they haven't been able to win a game since. Like we all of a sudden sent them off in a tailspin.
They broke them
to the Dodgers. Yeah, it was crazy. So that was huge, man. To kick off that first 3 games, the way they did it. But I'm with you. Towards the end there, against the Astros, they just didn't have. There was never really that feeling of. You had that feeling like you did if you remember go back to 2021, 2022 days, where every time you went into, used to be called Minute Maid, now it's the ice box, Daikin Field, or whatever they're trying to call it. But every time you went in there, you're like, oh man, if we got a 1 or 2 run lead, it's just we're not going to hold it. And so you had that kind of vibe to it. And then you mentioned Altuve too, just coughing up 2-1, 3-1 counts to him. Fastball's middle of the plate. You throw something, anything away from the middle, he's going to swing and miss. And so that was a little frustrating. There's a lot of frustrating moments for that. However, the biggest takeaway, and this is the one that's when you're talking long term and how you feel about this team and coming back home and everything else, the biggest takeaway is that rotation, man. It is finally starting to feel like that's the backbone of this team. You go from barely scraping 5 innings per start and taking 19, 20 pitches per inning at some point, to all of a sudden you've got guys like Logan Evans, even Emerson Hancock too. All of a sudden now you're pushing up to the 5.4 innings per start. You're down around 15 pitches per inning. And some of these numbers, I know it sounds boring, but if you want to preserve a bullpen, preserve Andres Munoz. You got a Matt Brash who's slowly coming back from the IL. Gabe Spire, who you're leaning on pretty heavily. When you can get your starting pitching deeper into those games, well, all of a sudden everything changes. And then all of a sudden your offense doesn't have to be night in, night out, killing it, every at bat or coming up with that big hit constantly, because it's not going to happen. Again, Padres, I mean, they can't hit all of a sudden. And now, the Angels, now all of a sudden they're crushing the ball. Offense comes and goes, but the pitching, it's starting to stabilize, which is great. And then all of a sudden you get Kirby back. I know he didn't look great, but he's going to be fine. Apparently Bryce Miller's coming back. I hope they're not bringing him back too soon. Hopefully he's had a big enough, gulp of air to come back. And then, Logan Gilbert as well. So, again, the biggest takeaway, a long-winded answer, starting pitching, it's starting to look back to what we're used to seeing.
Well, Ryan, you just said it. Offense comes and goes. Pitching is, now I know you're saying that probably because you're a pitcher, but, that's like the backbone of the team. No, but are you concerned about the offensive numbers? I mean, there are certain guys, especially, I think Polanco probably the one that's most drastic, but it does come and go, as you said. I mean, any cause for concern? I mean, on the road trip, you got a lot out of your 2 superstars, out of Julio and Cal.
Julio,
yeah. Mm-hmm. But what do you think?
Yeah, a couple of things I was diving into. I was listening to the radio to Brock and Salk this morning, and I was talking to Jeff Passan about some numbers later in the game. Third at bat, fourth at bat. If you go back, the last 10 games, I'll use this road trip for example. There were some good moments. You had a situation, Leo de Tavares bailing them out in the 8th inning in that. They nearly went 1-2 against the White Sox. And you're like, oh man, I'm telling you, flying into Houston would have been much tougher. But he bailed them out, hit that 2-run bomb to take the lead, which was huge. So if you look at some of the numbers, 3rd and 4th at bat, I'm getting somewhere with this too and why it's important. But you look at the situation, on base percentage, when you're deep in the game, those last ABs where you feel like you're still in it, right? Remember going back the last couple years, if it's like if they didn't have four runs or they were down by a run or two, it's like, man, okay, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
But you went from a situation, the first 42 games this season, going into that road trip, you had non-base 322. And so you had base runners. The swing and miss, it's about the same as what it is now. Now all of a sudden you're on bases around 200 even in this last road trip. And so the last 10 games, I'm thinking about a situation where you get those big moments, and you're looking around for that big hit. And I'll get to Polanco in a second, some other members too. And there's nothing but soft contact. They're not swinging and missing as much as they were last year, or that's not the issue. It's just a ground ball rate is through the roof. They're just hitting ground balls. They're jumping on pitches out of the strike zone, putting contact, but just not doing the damage. And then Polanco, look, Polanco, man, I'm not saying he carried the offense in the first month of the season, but it's been a complete 180 for him. You're talking about hitting the ball in the ground. He's hitting the ball in the ground around 68, 70%. It's insane. So something there, maybe it's mechanical or something in regards to when he's making contact or the swing path, but he's got to get the ball in the air. And it doesn't mean he has to launch, like I'm talking, try and, launch home runs. Just get back to that Polanco that we're used to seeing when he is at his best a couple of years ago, just line drives, finding outfield grass. For some reason, whether it's posture, whether it's attack angle, not to get down a rabbit hole here, but something's going on with the same pitches that he was hitting in the air and hit with authority. Now, all of a sudden, he's hitting the ball on the ground. And then what that turns into is chase, too. So I am concerned about Polanco. I feel like once he starts getting the ball in the air, I think the chase will cut down because he's not pressing so much. But outside of Cal and Julio, yeah, there's a couple guys that just they're just not getting on base as much as they used to be. And there's just not that big hit, third and fourth at bat in the game.
Yeah, and it's the guys that carried the offense outside of Cal in the opening month. I mean, Polanco is the biggest example, as you point out. I mean, he hit 379 in the month of April with a 422 on base. His OPS was 1284. And now you look at him in the month of May, hitting a $155 with a 234. I mean, just a complete night and day switch. The other guy's J.P. Crawford, who got off to such a great start. You look at him, he's 7 for 33 on that road trip. He's hitting 229, 326 on base, 664 OPS for the month of May. Dylan Moore was another guy who was really hot. He goes 5 for 30 in that 10-game road trip. He's hitting 216 with a 281 on base, 634 OPS for the month of May. And then Rivas, I don't really understand how Rivas is being used. He's not a guy he was getting on base at a ridiculous clip. Remember, he had a 500 on base. 500, yeah. Yeah, he went 1 for 13 in this 10-game road trip. He's hitting a $179 with a 281 on base for the month of May. And I don't hold him to the same standard because, again, he's not playing every day. But what do you make of it's just kind of collectively all the guys that were sort of carrying this offense have all cooled, and some have cooled extremely.
Well, a couple of things on Rivas that stand out to me. Remember when he was going through, you talk about the on base and talk about some of the production. First of all, he was playing more regularly too, right? So it was a situation where if look, not saying you ever get comfortable, but you kind of have that feeling like, you know what, because Ryan Bliss is out. If you remember going back to the beginning of the year, they're trying to mix and match and figure out who was going to play third base. Rivas was option number one, essentially, especially at second base. So he's kind of walking in every day going, you know what, I don't feel like I have to press. That's number one. Number two, remember, and I'm not talking about, we talk about protection in the middle of the lineup. When you have JP in the 9-hole, right, and he's an on-base, like, just machine, which he is. And by the way, you mentioned the on-base is still, 360, even when he's scuffling at the plate to hit. When you have that, well, then Rivas is going to get pitched to a little bit more. The other part of this is too, when you get rid of some of that depth 7, 8, 9, then all of a sudden get pitched to a little bit more. You get a little bit more exposed because the scouting report builds on you as well. And then the guy who was hitting in front of him, Ben Williamson, he hasn't been the same either. So you kind of lose a little bit of that support around you too. So again, I'm not making excuses for Rivas. I still think he's a really dynamic player. I just feel like, with him, he's kind of all of a sudden, because he doesn't have the pieces around him, where he's going to get pitched to a little bit differently, that's for sure. And again, I just think that when you lose Polanco up the top, and you have J.P. Crawford leading off. Julio's slid down to third, which, by the way, I love, man. If you look at some of the splits, him leading off to compared to hitting second and then compared to hitting third, man, he's so comfortable there. I love it. But it's when you have to shuffle the lineup around and you lose a bit of depth down the bottom, because that's where JP was. Remember, he was hitting ninth. Mm-hmm. Ben Williamson's not doing the same thing. It affects everyone else. And I think there's a little bit of that rolling into it as well.
Hey, Ryan, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but just wanted to get your input on, once they get everybody healthy, what do they do with Logan Evans? Do they have a six-man rotation? And some of the, sort of, differences between that. I mean, is that like a super convenience? I mean, to have six guys, it stretches it out a little bit, save guys' arms. Or do you get like into a groove where it's like, it might screw somebody up?
Yeah, man, it's a tough one, because I guarantee you, Luis Castillo, especially now, he's all of a sudden, found his groove. Velocity's back consistently. And if you say to him, hey, listen, because there is I just looked at the schedule. You basically, if you go six-man rotation, there is 6 days, because you always have an off day. So there's a couple stretches there where you won't, but there's only 2 or 3, maybe 3. That's a long time in between outings. And not to mention, too, guys are so used to saying, hey, look, I need to get to that 30 outing mark, or I need to get to that 25 outing mark, whatever it is, selfishly. Now, a couple things on that. Number one, it's a touchy one, because the Mariners are in such a unique position. Bryce Miller, I think, I mentioned this in the beginning, right? I watched him pitch, do his throw to hitters, even though they weren't swinging. He was letting it eat the other day. Like, it wasn't like this, hey, this is my first time back on the mound against hitters. No. He was like letting it. He's ready to go. But I'm sitting there going, man, like with Bryce, take your time a little bit. You've got some options here where Bryce can, go pitch in AAA with umpires and guys who are hitting, guys who want to take your head off. Like, go compete a little bit before you get thrown right back into this rotation, because as much as I want Bryce Miller back, I want him back where he's not questioning anything he does. And so I'm looking at this thinking, man, like, if Bryce comes right back, Logan Gilbert comes right back, there is going to be an odd man out, obviously. But it's not a bad thing. You need to have that. I just think in regards to the six-man rotation, I would maybe steer clear of it until you get into when it starts heating up a little bit. Maybe there's a stretch there where you add a six-man as you get into late July, like after the All-Star break, into August potentially, or even through the month of September, depending on where you're at. I just don't want a situation where you're losing out on that extra start per week from a good Brian Wu, good Luis Castillo, Logan Gilbert when he's back, just to have a six-man rotation, because, man, there's plenty of off days in there. And I'm telling you, the Mariners are better than anyone when it comes to managing some of these, the workload for some of these pitchers. So I don't know. I'm not big on the six-man rotation, to be honest with you.
Well, before we let you go, as far as Logan Evans goes, I can't remember who we played a clip from, but they were talking about using him in long relief potentially to keep him up. That apparently he's done some of that before. I don't really know his complete history, but would that be something you would consider, or is it more beneficial, do you think, just to let him go down AAA and start on a regular rotation and just be stretched out if they need him?
Go down to AAA, unless you're a situation where you go like the Astros used to have this guy, Davinsky, who would come in, rubber arm every day, could bridge a gap if you're still in it after a starter goes 4 and go 5-6 into the back end of your bullpen. No. Logan Evans, development-wise, send him to AAA, keep him, because there is, I hate to say it, knock on wood, but there is a very high chance of another injury later on this season. You don't want a situation. You don't need him to go long relief, man. Like, that's just. And by the way, like, if he does, guess what? He's got to sit for 2-3 days. It really doesn't serve that much of a purpose, to be honest with you, when you can cycle through a man who kind of. I'm not going to call it a mop-up, but can fill that void when the team. If a starter goes out after 3-4 innings, when you're talking July, August, September, chances are the game's out of reach anyway. Don't burn that on Logan Evans. Send him to AAA and make sure he's ready to roll, because he will play. I think he will play a role later on this season.
He is Ryan Rowland-Smith with us each and every week talking Mariner baseball.